Good afternoon to you, sir. This is only President Putin's second trip outside of Russia during the entire pandemic. I think Moscow is perhaps placing quite a lot of importance on this. Doctor, I was just saying to my correspondent earlier that I don't remember the last time I've seen Putin, Lavrov and Shoigu in the same place at more or less the same time.
Yeah, I mean, India is ground zero or central now for the world's future. And I think President Putin mentioned in his opening remarks with Prime Minister Modi that Russia considers India to be a great power. And Russia wants a multipolar world order where Russia itself, India, and of course China and the US, and all of these should be counted as significant powers that have their own respective zones of influence. So I think he has shown that additional care and concern for India. He's always been attentive to our needs on national security issues, for our defense requirements. Whenever we have been facing crises with our neighbors, Russia has been there to support us through that thick and thin. And I think Prime Minister Modi also mentioned the historic juncture. It's 50 years since the Russia-India Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation was signed in 1971, and then 20 years since the strategic partnership has blossomed like this. So the world orders have changed. It was a bipolar order, then unipolar. Now we are going again towards a multipolar order. But Russia-India, it looks like it's the most stable, and the reason is simple. The convergence is because our leaderships understand each other. There's a history of trust, and there's also very pragmatic. They look at bilateral ties as somewhat different from our relationship with other significant partners, and we understand each other's compulsions. We understand why Russia has a problem with the West, and Russia understands why we have a problem with China. So in that sense, it's a mature and one partnership based on deep mutual understanding, and I dare say even love.
I was going to mention that in just a few moments from now. I will ask you a question about the potentially delicate dance Putin has to do, as he's a bit of an interlocutor and a mediator between that of Russia, India and China as well. But before we get there, though, I wanted to ask you, you talked about having issues with the West. I mean, do you think a strong partnership between India and Russia could impact New Delhi's relationship with Washington?
I think you can't hyphenate the two. But what I think for Russia, it helps to show is that it's not only China, it also has India on its side. And that helps to counter, any Western attempts to isolate Russia. India has never gone along with any American initiatives to isolate or to impose sanctions or to boycott Russia. They did that in 2014 also, after the Crimea was reintegrated into Russia. The Barack Obama administration demanded that we should, join sanctions and boycott Russia. We never did that. And Russia stood by us even after when we took important measures in Kashmir to integrate it as part of India and abrogated Article 370 in 2019. Russia was one of the first countries to say, we understand this for national security. So I think the Western pressure on Russia, unfortunately, should not be there, in my own view. And many of us in India believe that, frankly, if the US wants to counterbalance China, why are they antagonizing Russia? For what? Why are they driving Russia closer into China's embrace? That's the thinking in India. So we would hope that better sense prevails. We are also talking to the West on the issue of sanctions, threatened sanctions on India, because we are buying the S-400 from Russia. And we have categorically told them, with Russia, it's a special partnership. We can never abandon them. And in fact, Sergei Lavrov was saying today in Delhi, I heard that, India must be appreciated because it's an independent power. And while it may have a partnership with the US that is blossoming, it doesn't mean that we will not take our own sovereign decisions in our own national interests.
So you're saying that perhaps Washington doesn't want you guys to be independent, perhaps, and be strong as well, because you're talking about the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You're talking about the BRICS nations as well. You're talking about energy and security and military deals being done in that part of the world. And what we're seeing here is essentially a coagulation of partners in that part of the world really coming together. And many analysts, even the BBC today, is warning this is the future of the new world. Dr. Chaulia, what do you say to that?
Well, Rory, I'll only say that, Biden will dig himself deeper into a hole if he's not able to come up with a modus vivendi with Russia. Our view in India is that Russia should not be antagonized. Russia should not be penalized for no fault of its. Russia must be understood. Its security concerns must be given their due consideration in Eastern Europe. And in return, it will help the US geostrategic interests. I think they are being very narrow-minded, and they are being propelled by domestic, factions in the Democratic Party in the U.S. that are very, very hostile to Russia. But here in India, we have a totally different view, and we are explaining to the Americans many times that, you are shooting yourself in your foot by going too aggressive on Russia, and that's not good. If you have a grand strategy, revisit Henry Kissinger, 1970s. If it's a triangular thing, you need to make sure that you have aligned with the countries with whom you don't have a significant problem. But Russia should not be a significant problem to the West. President Putin talks about, the West, and he says that our Western friends, he still refers to them as friends. So hopefully they can work out something, and that will be good for us in India too.
Well, maybe there's some competition there.
We don't want to make a choice.
Dr. Chaulia, maybe there's some competition there. I mean, America is the biggest arms exporter in the world. Russia is number 2. So perhaps Langley, Virginia is not going to appreciate it when other countries are buying weapons from Russia. I wanted to ask you about this delicate dance for Vladimir Putin. India and China, as you well know, had these clashes, these border clashes in Ladakh and the Himalayas on June 2020. It took 12 rounds of meetings between India and China to actually find some sort of resolution to that. Obviously, Russia is friends with India. Russia is friends with China. They both want the S-400. Is Putin doing a delicate dance right now to engage his friends both in India and China, do you think?
Well, it's amazing that both China and India do not mind Russia playing a constructive role as a facilitator or as an interlocutor, if not as a mediator. The thing is that, in India, we have conveyed our concerns about our own security that have been hampered by Chinese actions via Russia. And in fact, the RIC, Russia, India, China, and the BRICS forums have been the platforms where actually many of the core agreements for disengagement between China and India were signed. Last year, there was a 5-point agreement to de-escalate tensions. So Russia has been playing this role. Even in 2017, there was a face-off between Indian and Chinese militaries at the tri-junction with Bhutan. And then also Russia came into play and helped to resolve it. So we don't mind that. In fact, it shows Russia's importance as a diplomatic player on the world stage. And because both sides have, mutual trust in Russia, I think this is definitely an enhancement tool for Russia's soft power to be seen to be, maintaining stability in the Eurasian order. We don't want war with China, but we want them to respect our sovereignty. And that's what we're telling the Russians. And Russians have been very helpful in getting the message across, and also from that side to this side.
Yeah, it's really interesting, this meeting that's happening now over the next 24 hours there in India with these Russian officials, basically the 3 most important men from Moscow flying to where you are now. It's fascinating stuff. Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, Professor and Dean of the Jindal School of International Affairs. Thank you so much.